Hello everyone. So I've seen a few people do now a top really large number of books, and several months ago I did a poll on whether people wanted a Q&A or me to do my top a lot of books, and you guys voted for both, and I never did the top books, which is kind of embarrassing because for those who don't know, I actually have a Google Doc with my top 274 books. So I could do a top 274 with zero prep. Now, that's every book that's gotten at least 4 stars on Goodreads. So the ones near the bottom are kind of yeah, they're pretty good. Because they got 7.0 out of 10, which is it's a book that's, I think, is good. So the bottom is Sword of Destiny by Andrzej Sapkowski, Holy Sister by Mark Lawrence. So I enjoyed reading those books, but those aren't exactly the books that I talk about a lot. I decided to make the cutoff 150. I'm going to make the group smaller and smaller as I go up. So this first one is going to be 150 to 126. Also, as a note, because I don't want to give any information to Kyle or Ben, at the time of recording this, the only TBR book that I have read that they don't know my opinion of is Daughter of the Empire by Janie Wirtz and Raymond E. Feist. So obviously 2 possibilities. Possibility 1 is that book isn't in this top 150 at all, and if I upload it all before they know the scores, they'll be able to see this and know it's not in the 150, which would give away information. And the other possibility is that it's in the 150, and I get to it, and I'm like, next up, Daughter of the Empire by Raymond E. Feist, which obviously also gives away the score I got. So I'll just have it noted that in the case where it was in the 150, I would have just not included it. So you're not getting any information from this, Kyle or Ben. Let's get on with it. Okay, we're going to have to go through these quickly. It's going to be a lot of books. So number 150, I've got Tress of the Emerald Sea by Brandon Sanderson. Gee, I wonder if you'll hear that name again. Prose is general vibe, setting, and narration. Cons is the random... Cat, are you attacking something random? Is the random backstory, there's the random chapter of the story of, the guy and the king that's just completely ridiculous. Ending was pretty great. Yeah. 149, we've got Empire of Silence by Christopher Rocchio. This is, of the 6 now Sun Eater books, pretty comfortably my least favorite, but it's still pretty awesome. Biggest pros is that I think Hadrian's narration is just incredibly strong. I think the line-by-line writing and atmosphere is already excellent. I really enjoy the style of the super old Hadrian narrating, and having to narrate the story of himself, but a version of himself that at this point is so different from the narrator that he clearly feels weird narrating it. Also, the world building and setting are awesome. 148 is Jade City by Fonda Lee. Biggest strength, I would say, for this story was that I think the characters are very distinctive. I think Fonda Lee, which, also, hey, I wonder if all these authors are going to come up again. Yeah, all these authors are going to have repeats on this list so far. So we haven't gotten to any time that this is the highest book of any author on the list. I think she's very good at having dialogue and character interactions, at keeping in mind the character's position in life relative to each other and how that would affect how they interact with each other. All the main protagonists are completely interesting. Biggest con, I would say, is while I was interested in the characters in this book, I was not particularly emotionally invested in the characters. And there were scenes that were clearly supposed to be very emotional that I didn't find that emotional, but I was still interested enough that it didn't matter. I've already lost track of where we are. 150, 149, 148. 147, The Will to Battle by Ada Palmer. This is book 3 of Terra Ignota. This also will not be the last time you see Ada Palmer. Biggest pros is, as for every time of this series, is the absolutely ridiculous genius world building, and honestly writing and exploration of theme. Terra Ignota is just fucking genius. And I can't emphasize that enough. The biggest con is that it kind of has House of Dragons Season 2 syndrome, where, at the start of the book, it's like, oh shit, this is about to go down. And then at the end, like at the 80% mark, you're still like, oh, this is like about to go down. And then you're kind of like, wait, wasn't this kind of the same position we were in on page 1 of this book? And now I'm 80% in. But despite that, it's still brilliant. Number 146 is not the Silmarillion. This is a representation of a chapter in here that is the Children of Húrin. I don't have a physical copy of the Children of Húrin, but the Children of Húrin is awesome. If you're a Tolkien fan who's not read the Children of Húrin, I highly recommend it. It has one of Tolkien's best characters that he has ever written. Adds a lot to the lore and world building, and generally has some great writing. And number 145 is, well, this is 2 books, but is specifically The Price of Spring, the final book in the Long Price Quartet. Very excellent final beat and moments. I remember getting to the last chapter and being like, damn, what a good ending. And then seeing there's an epilogue and being like, I don't know if they're going to manage like as good of a final beat as we got. And then there was an even better one. Biggest reason this is my 3rd favorite Long Price Quartet is there's just like a conflict between 2 main characters that the book just kind of treats like is this big, huge deal. And I just never felt it was a big deal. Like, I was just kind of like, wait, what? I just don't. Yeah. So that held it back, but extremely high quality character writing earns its way to the 145 spot. Moving on. Okay, next group of 5. This might actually be the highest average quality level of prose from a line-by-line writing standpoint until we get like pretty high on this list. Number 144 is our first top appearance of an author. You will not see this author on my list again after this, and it is The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss, a book I don't talk about that long because I read it quite a while ago, but I've actually read it multiple times. You may have heard of it. I do really enjoy the process of reading it and enjoy the writing on a line-by-line setting. I also quite enjoy the world and Koth as a protagonist. So overall, I do really like this book. I don't find a lot of the supporting cast to be super interesting. That would be its main con. I actually like the writing more in the like third-person omniscient current stuff than I do in like the Koth backstory. Beating out at number 143 is No Country for Old Men by Cormac McCarthy. A very tense book that like feels really weird because the writing style, when you're reading it page by page, sometimes feels overly descriptive to the point of inefficiency, where it'll be like if like you were describing me like walking over to the fridge, it wouldn't be like Jake walked over to the fridge. It'd be like Jake stood back a little bit and then stood up and then walked to the right and then bobbed around some chairs and then opened the fridge. And it's like, why did you need all those words, Cormac? But the weird thing is, in totality, it ends up feeling super efficient with the amount of story it tells. I don't know how that works, but it's excellent. We're moving on to The Earth of the New Sun by Gene Wolfe. This is the 5th book that Gene claims doesn't actually add anything new to the series and that everything in here was in the main 4. But what the ever-loving crap, this was all new. What are you talking about, Gene? So apparently I was just not... If you're smart enough, you don't have to read this book, but I'm definitely not smart enough. Severian is obviously an incredible protagonist. The writing and setting is next level, and I think this does a great job of... This was just, like, written later. It wasn't originally planned. But... oh, there goes an alarm in the background. A siren, sorry, not an alarm. But we're not editing out. We're doing this live. But it doesn't it feels like this was always the plan after you read it. Speaking of Gene Wolfe, number 140, whatever, I can't keep track of numbers now, you'll say 141, Claw of the Conciliator by Gene Wolfe in this absolutely gorgeous edition by the Folio Society. Claw of the Conciliator, also these are there's 3 more Gene Wolfes after this. Claw of the Conciliator is just barely my least favorite of the 4. It does have what some people consider the most genius next level chapter in the entire series. But while the other 3 books in the series, while they were confusing and challenging for me, they were like almost entirely challenging in a way where I was still really enjoying what I was reading. This book had a couple chapters where I was just like, I literally don't know what the hell is going on. So that dropped the enjoyment for a little bit. We'll see if it goes up whenever I reread it. It probably will. Speaking of another book that will likely go up on reread, as I expect the series to go up slightly on reread. Actually, maybe not this one. Anyway, we have Reaper's Gale by Steven Erikson. Again, you are going to see more Steven Erikson on this list. Should mention, I've only read one Cormac McCarthy book, so you won't see more Cormac McCarthy on this list. Reaper's Gale for me is the most distinct split in terms of first half and second half of Malazan Book of the Fallen. The first half of Reaper's Gale is one of my least favorite halves of any Malazan book, but then the second half just goes absolutely incredibly hard. Many all caps. I still remember, like, you know the books that really hit you where you think back to reading them and you like get the echo of the emotional experience you have? Reaper's Gale has that, and if it wasn't for the first half, it would be in contention for my favorite Malazan novel. Now let's go on to 139. Okay, number 139 is The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. This once again will be the last time you see this author on the list. Definitely a more simple story than the last couple I talked about, but I think extremely emotionally compelling, very well written. Definitely had some struggles to really flesh out the supporting characters, but that's more just as a general aspect of the narrative, which is someone who the main character everyone gets forgotten about. Also quite like the dual timeline, and overall was just a pretty emotional book. Number 138 is Monsters of Men by Patrick Ness. This will not be the last time you see Patrick Ness. This is the third book in the Chaos Walking trilogy I read a couple of years ago. It is my second favorite book in the trilogy because this is technically a YA series, and it does every once in a while have the annoying thing of the two main characters' love interests shouting each other's names whenever they're in danger far away. But it handled the conflict between both the humans and each other and the humans and the alien race on this planet incredibly well and was gripping throughout, so earns a spot on this list. 137 is Setagonda by Lois McMaster Bujold, which I do not have physically because I read on e-reader. Obviously, you are going to hear more about Lois McMaster Bujold. Setagonda is one of my least favorite Vorkoskin. Is it my least favorite Vorkoskin novel? Setagonda is my least favorite Vorkoskin novel. So you're going to see every that I've read. I've only read up to memory. So you're going to see every Vorkoskin novel that I've read above this. That's because it's basically a side quest where Miles is off on Setagonda. But it's a good side quest. It's a murder mystery. It's got really good character work, interesting world building, and Miles is just one of my favorite characters ever, so the floor is just extremely high. 136, an author who you definitely won't see again, because, I just don't happen to like them at all, is All the Seas of the World by Guy Gavriel Kay. I've read this twice, and on my first read, this wouldn't have made the list, because I read it having not read A Brightness Long Ago, and I stand by that this does not work particularly well as the standalone it's supposed to be. But as a follow-up to A Brightness Long Ago, I think it's excellent. And a lot of its emotional payoff is set up in its supporting cast based on Brightness Long Ago. And I also think the second time around, the main emotional journey of the protagonist worked better for me and was extremely powerful. Also, it's GGK, so the line-by-line writing is next goddamn level. Speaking of next goddamn level line-by-line writing, The Spear Cuts Through Water by Simon Jimenez is number 135. This is definitely one that could go up on reread, because during the first part of this book, it's a 5-part book, for the first 100 pages, I had no goddamn clue what was going on, because my brain wasn't big enough for it. This is as both, the main narrative, but also a bunch of meta-narratives, and the meta-narratives certainly make it a more impressive work of fiction, but I don't know if I enjoyed it more because of that, because my brain wasn't big enough. That being said, it's just got excellent writing, and it does this magical thing where, every section is better than the previous section, and it just keeps getting better and better. It's definitely one that's worthy of a reread, because I really think I will enjoy it more when I know what the hell is going on for the first 80 pages. All right, next group of 5. Here we go. 134, we have The Veiled Throne by Ken Liu. You're also going to see more Ken Liu up this list. So The Veiled Throne is one of the novels that is just the first, this is the first half of the giant novel that is supposed to be Veiled Throne and Speaking Bones, and you definitely do feel it at times, which is why you're going to see Speaking Bones a lot higher up on this, but it's just got so much good stuff in its favor. Are you a fan of stories within stories? Then I have another book that you can be a fan of. Hey, wow, Spear Cuts Through Water and Veiled Throne back to back. That's got to be like, count the stories within stories. We're getting in the double digits here, folks. This also cemented my favorite character in the Dandelion Dynasty as one of my favorite characters in the Dandelion Dynasty, and already having read this book, they were one of my top 10 favorite characters of all time, one per author. And this is noteworthy because I think I love them like distinctly more in Speaking Bones, and they were already one of my top 10 favorite characters. It managed like arguably too many plots, but I loved basically all of them. Did we need the cooking competition? Probably not. Did I end up enjoying the cooking competition? Abso-freaking-lutely. Moving on, we have Small Gods by Terry Pratchett. This will unfortunately be the last time you see Terry Pratchett on this list, as I've only read 3 of his books, and Small Gods is easily my favorite. Small Gods, like the other two, is completely hilarious, but unlike the other two, I also was really compelled by the story and found it had a lot of satisfying intellectual and emotional payoff. Really enjoyed the premise, really enjoyed the execution. My cat just knocked something over, really enjoyed the ending. At 132, we have Ghost Story by Jim Butcher, an author you are going to see a lot more of. This novel keeps moving up on reread. The first time I read it in like 2014, it was my second least favorite Dresden book and probably wouldn't have been on this list at all. But it just keeps climbing its way up. I think it has reached as high as it's going to, but I keep thinking that and it keeps moving up. Maybe one day I'll be cool enough to say that Ghost Story is my favorite Dresden book. However, I do think that despite it being one of the most thematically and emotionally resonant novels of the Dresden Files, there are some unique aspects about it from a storytelling standpoint that Jim Butcher slightly struggles with, so it stays down here. Next up, we have The Final Empire by Brandon Sanderson, which is our first... No, it's not our first repeat author. We've already had Gene Wolfe on here twice. It is our second repeat author. And no, I will not be calling this book Mistborn. I've read this book a number of times. It has been a while since I've read it, but every time I've read it, I have thought it was awesome. The general payoff coming down the stretch is extraordinary, and I very much enjoyed the entire cast of characters and setting. And I think Brandon is just very good at making world-ending stakes feel like world-ending stakes. Beating it out by one spot is The Blade Itself by Joe Abercrombie. I'm probably higher on The Blade Itself relative to the rest of The First Law than a lot of other Abercrombie fans, but yes, you are going to see a lot more Joe Abercrombie as this goes on. The Blade Itself famously is not super plot-heavy, but does have extremely interesting characters. I have never been incredibly emotionally attached to Joe Abercrombie's characters, partially because they're all bastards, but they are so interesting in both premise and execution, and they all stand out in terms of character voice so distinctly. And at spot number 129, we have the first appearance of my favorite author of all time in Shaman's Crossing by Robin Hobb. If you hate this book, I completely understand because it is a complete mess from the standpoint of pacing, and the main character can be extremely annoying because he's kind of trying to be lawful good, but he lacks the empathy required to be truly considerate and just the ability to empathize with people who are different enough for him that he kind of just ends up being a self-righteous asshole. Despite this, I still think this book is awesome because the character work is done by Robin Hobb and ends up just being next level amazing. There are about 15 relationships in this book that are strong, complex, dynamic, unique, and multifaceted enough to be the central relationship of any good story, but we get 15 of them. Also, the entire last 100 pages is complete insanity that goes off extremely hard. One spot above is a book that isn't a complete disaster, and that is Rita Hayworth and The Shawshank Redemption, the novel version of my favorite movie of all time that I finally read last year. Just an inspiring story of a man who I think is truly a badass despite being very quiet and thin and like in a non-conventional way. I do think the movie's better though. 127, we have Dogs of War by Adrian Tchaikovsky. An extremely unique book that takes its premise and runs with it so completely that it could have been a 5-book series and instead is like a reasonably short novel. I think Tchaikovsky goes very wide with his exploration of theme, and like Children of Time, the amount of topics he was able to cover here was next level. 126, we have Deadhouse Gates by Steven Erikson. Hey, another repeat author who's going to be on here some more. The back half, like, a lot of this book goes completely hard, and it has some of the most, like, the best scenes and plot lines in Malazan Book of the Fallen. And then there's this plot line of Caleb on a boat. We don't worry about that, though. I do think I like a number of the Malazan books distinctly more, as I think, wow, the line-by-line writing here is very good, that in my opinion, I distinctly prefer the prose in some of his later novels. That being said, I do love Duiker as a protagonist. The Felisin plot is excellent, and so is the Mappo plot. And coming in at 125, we have Proven Guilty by Jim Butcher, which is, of course, another novel in the Dresden Files. This one is more of a standard Dresden novel. Harry's one of my favorite characters of all time, and this has some of my favorite character works in the moment. It also has a moment near the end that's very icky, but most of the book is straight fire, so I am able to ignore that. And there we go. That is 150 through 125 of my favorite books of all time. Now, I'm sure it will happen, because I procrastinate a lot, that while I was thinking of doing this, I will read more books, unless I just record them all right now, and then release them to you piecemeal. I could do that. Hope you enjoyed the video. We got a few of these more to go. I think I'll do another 25 to get it to 100, and then I might go like 15 or 10 at a time. Let me know in the comments below, what are some books that you think will be in the top 25? What are the books that you're starting to be like, surely he's going to have this in his top 150, and you're starting to worry aren't there? What are some books that you know I have in my top 150, and you're just like, you better not say next, because this better be higher on the list? Let me know. Have a good day, everyone.